What does desperation actually taste like? During the brutal sieges of the 20th century, generals poured millions into massive artillery and armored divisions, yet the civilian home front fought a quieter battle. Mothers were forced to bake daily survival loaves, using pulverized tree bark and sawdust. Wood became the new golden wheat. It was a brutal manifestation of rapid wartime inflation. Governments stretched dwindling food supplies by feeding citizens forests. When military logistics collapse, the human stomach becomes an economic ledger. The ultimate price of military glory is often paid by civilians digesting the architecture of their cities. Let us investigate the dark economy of sawdust bread. The math of siege is simple. When an invading army encircles the major city, the vital civilian supply chain severs completely overnight. Food reserves are immediately calculated, categorized, and seized. The military command claims absolute priority over grain. Families caught in the terrifying crossfire suddenly calculate survival in dwindling flour grounds. When a state's currency loses purchasing power, the physical bread loaf becomes the ultimate economic indicator. Rationing apparatus state-sponsored organized starvation. Governments cannot magically produce wheat from shelled earth. They must systematically adulterate the existing food supply. Desperate bureaucrats mandated bakers to mix foreign additives. The grim legislation birthed the substitute food economy. During World War I, Germany introduced the infamous Kriegsbrot to stretch precious resources. The desperate state effectively collects the biological energy of its citizens to fund the endless war. Wood cellulose entered the food chain. Sawmills were suddenly repurposed to feed civilian bakeries. Unpied sawdust was chemically treated and mixed. It provided absolutely zero actual human nutritional value. The primary goal was tricking the empty stomach. Civilians gnawed through heavy, splintered loaves, tasting of damp ash just to survive, replacing actual nutrition with indigestible industrial filler. Point represented a cold calculation to sacrifice the home front. This became reality of Leningrad. During the grueling siege in 1941, the official bread ration dropped to meager grams. That tiny slice was heavily adulterated with birch. Cottonseed cake and industrial floor sweepings were baked. Exhausted people stood in freezing sub-zero temperatures, trading stamped ration cards for wood. By enslaving the physical body of food, the desperate empire cannibalized its citizens' biological energy reserves. The black market valued unadulterated flour. Starving poor choked down the bitter state blocks. The wealthy desperately traded family heirlooms for wheat. A single pure zack could buy grand pianos. The shadow economy revealed terrifying basic nutritional hyperinflation. The horrific disparity showcased how wartime logistics ruthlessly separated the starving from survival. In the grip of prolonged military siege, the most stable currency is the unadulterated, digestible calorie. The biology of deception is brutal. The human digestive system cannot process raw wood. We completely lack the specific biological enzymes required. Termites and cattle can easily digest tree bark. Human bodies expend massive energy trying to pass it. Eating sawdust bread created a highly dangerous, fatal illusion of actual caloric intake. The ultimate economic bankruptcy occurred when the mandated currency of survival is exposed as completely counterfeit. Urban bakeries transformed into lumber mills. Government chemists desperately experimented with heavy chemical treatment. They attempted to soften the harsh wood fibers. It was an absurd, industrial-scale culinary operation. Real agricultural output was entirely diverted to soldiers. Civilian infrastructure physically transformed to process forests instead of golden fields of grain. The architecture of poverty was literally reshaped by the state's insatiable appetite for military warfare funneling. The psychological illusion delayed inevitable panic. A completely empty stomach triggers immediate civilian riot. A heavy block of wood provides temporary comfort. The physical weight of the Sawdust bread deceived. It suppressed the urgent biological panic of starvation. The state manufactured false fullness to maintain domestic order during the catastrophic siege. They legislated a biological lie, exchanging actual nourishment for the temporary comfort of a heavy stomach. Malnutrition triggered an internal biological death. The immune system cannot function on fake calories. Without fats and proteins, the body simply stops. Citizens began to freeze from the inside out. The morgues rapidly filled with strangely IV forms. Doctors performed autopsies revealing stomachs completely packed, full of undigested, compacted wood fiber. The government successfully balanced the military supply sheath by deliberately bankrupting the entire civilian biological ledger. The biological debt finally came due. The human body can only run on temporary illusions briefly. The brutal winter siege month dragged into an endless freeze. The indigestible sawdust fillets began exacting a horrific civilian toll. Malnutrition masked by artificial fullness led to severe, agonized blockages. Desperate medical doctors watched helplessly as patients faded away with completely full stomachs. The ultimate economic bankruptcy occurs when the mandated currency of survival is exposed as entirely toxic. Counterfeit calories triggered a rapid collapse. The desperate state successfully manipulated the entire supply chain narrative. But you absolutely cannot legislate cellular energy from pine wood. The human immune system simply shut down without vital protein. State-issued wood bread became a silent and incredibly lethal killer. At the height of the grueling Eastern Siege, the civilian mortality rate skyrocketed exponentially. Every gram of wood cellulose baked into a daily loaf represented a cold decision for sacrifice. Inflation mutated into internal biological warfare. The ledger of a military war room ignored human digestion. While generals celebrated holding a violent line against enemy forces, their own civilian people collapsed under a crushing metabolic baguette. Thousands perished, entirely from the fatal mathematics of the bakery. The food meant to sustain the besieged city, in the direct instrument of their biological destruction. By replacing actual nutrition with sawdust, the empire effectively cannibalized its own citizens for the war. The deception caused a catastrophic famine. Starving families realized the state's bread was destroying them internally. The freezing morgues overflowed with bodies bearing physical markers of starvation. Lethal sickness ravaged the urban population weakened by the harsh diet. The counterfeit, industrial bread actively accelerated the gruesome daily death toll. Citizens finally understood that the desperate government, was prioritizing military logistics completely over civilian life. The war was ultimately financed by liquidating the ideological assets of the most vulnerable trapped populations. The legacy of ash of wood, the brutal memory of sawdust bread, haunts the survivors' generation. It stands as a dark monument to extreme artistical failure. Modern nations rarely face the grueling physical encirclement history, yet the terrifying vulnerability is of the human stomach to supply chain shocks names. The fundamental fragility of the modern global point food system mirrors the perilous calculus of the besieged. We still practice dietary substitution today. Though supermarkets are filled with highly processed, chemically engineered calories. We have traded pine sawdust for complex, artificial industrial fillers. The economic drive to threat ingredients maximizes immediate corporate profit. When a modern logistical crisis hits, the grocery shelves empty with terrifying, unpredictable speed. The price of power is ultimately paid by the civilian forced to consume the economic fallout. The grocery cart is incredibly fragile. A single geopolitical shock can instantly disrupt international grain shipments. Nations quickly hoard their agricultural output to protect domestic stability. As inflation surges, the hidden costs appear in shrinking retail packages. Our complex global networks mask the terrifying simplicity of human dependence on unadulterated harvests. Be abandoned. wagons of history of his permanent warnings for fragile modern global food economy. Survival requires more than just calories. It demands a logistical system that respects biology. We cannot build a sustainable future on a completely counterfeit foundation. A resilient society ensures that its most vulnerable ethers are safely nourished. The true measure of a civilization is what it puts into the daily bread.